Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about Baldo the Guardian Owls for the Nintendo Switch. Now the first thing that you probably noticed about the title of this video is I didn't use the word review in the title of the video. That's because currently I have not yet finished Baldo, and unfortunately at this point I most likely will not be finishing the game. Therefore, just to be fair and upfront with all of you and also the developers, I'm not officially going to be calling this a review. I am, however, more than 20 hours into the adventure, which is supposed to be overall around 50 hours long. And unfortunately, at this point in the adventure, I'm just no longer having any fun in the experience for some of the reasons that we're going to look at in the video, and that's why unfortunately I'm not going to be continuing my adventure with Baldo. I'm actually at the point where the last 5 hours of gameplay, I almost had to force myself to keep playing the game, and that's not something I want to do. So I've decided to share my experience of the game with all of you so far, and you can just decide if you want to take a chance on Baldo and on maybe the payoff at the end of the game being worth it. Now don't forget, as we go through the video, if you do like this kind of content, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. So just to begin and set the stage, I'll explain nonetheless that Baldo in essence is a top-down action-adventure puzzle game set in a magical universe featuring a Studio Ghibli-esque art style. The game has you adventuring through a decently sized overworld and also exploring towns and dungeons. To answer the first question, yes, this does create an overarching Zelda-like experience. Now, before we get to any of the problems, I do want to say that what this game does do well is it oozes charm in both its art style and its character designs. And it actually does this part so well that to some people, they might nonetheless be able to enjoy their experience by focusing on the charm and overlooking or maybe downplaying some of the more frustrating design choices that they made here. Also, I do believe that deep down there is a good game somewhere in here, and I'll be touching that in some of my final thoughts. I also have to respect that this is a team of only 2 people that took on a monstrous task of a 50+ hour Zelda-like adventure that is normally developed by a much larger team. However, I also have to be fair to my viewers and give you my honest feelings on my experience. The game actually started on a real high point, with a first dungeon I really enjoyed, with an original maze-like design, interesting puzzles, and ending in an okay boss fight. There were, however, already a few of the larger issues starting to pop up at this point, but they weren't yet ruining my overall experience. Until you realize that the whole game is actually paced in this way, they seem actually minor. The first being that there are way too many obstacles that are insta-kills in almost each and every room. And this isn't about challenge level, because what the developers did actually totally negates that challenge level. Actually, let's talk about that first, because it'll bring into frame what I'm trying to explain. Every time you die, you get a game over screen, but a few seconds later, you restart at the entrance of the last room, meaning that basically every doorway is a checkpoint. Dying in the end never means more than restarting the room you're currently in. However, the fact that there is that game over screen indicates to me at one point in the design cycle there was probably a way more penalizing death penalty. However, after playtesting, they probably realized it was unplayable, and rather than redesign the obstacles in a more fair way, they basically used this easy out. Now the problem is, it creates a situation where dying becomes meaningless, and the easiest way to refill your heart containers becomes purposefully dying. And over a 50-hour game, it just ends up feeling like bad design. And even were it limited to a few areas or even just the dungeons, it wouldn't actually be that bad, but it's present everywhere. Even the random overworld lizardmen just one-shot you. Now this alone would have diminished my experience, but not overall ruined it. Now that brings us to our second problem. The quest or story progression design is my biggest issue with the game. This game has a real bad habit of throwing a bunch of quests at you at once without actually indicating which needs to be tackled first. Normally, it's not too much of a problem and would indicate that it's the player's choice to complete them in whichever order they wish. But in Baldo, some quests are going to give you items that are prerequisites to completing others, without actually letting you know that before you start down the quest line. What this actually means is that you can work for a couple of hours down the quest line to reach the very end and realize you can't finish it, and you have to backtrack all the way back because you needed the item from a different quest first. Now, you could say that this is part of the experience, but I would just say it's a design flaw and it becomes extremely frustrating over a 50-hour game. Just for a second, let's take this game's inspiration, Zelda, and compare how Nintendo fixes this issue. When an item is required for a specific dungeon, what they do is at the very beginning of the dungeon, place an obstacle that requires that item to overcome it. Meaning you won't work your way through the dungeon without first finding that item, and then they will find new and original ways to use said item throughout the dungeon so it still feels fresh. Well, what Baldo does, on the other hand, is let you work 2 hours into the dungeon, get to the boss door, and in front of that door, pop down the one and only obstacle that requires said item to overcome it. Now, this is a dungeon example, but it works this way all throughout the game, meaning you spend a ton of your time backtracking and just trying to figure out where you're supposed to be going to next. Currently, I have 7 active quests with no idea which to tackle first, bringing me to different corners of the map. And from my experience thus far, if I choose the wrong one first, I'll have to backtrack again and again. The last point that I want to mention is that so far, although the world and character designs are just so charming, I do find that the overall storyline is quite bland. And every time you talk to a character, it just ends up being a laundry list of information and stuff you need to do. A little bit of extra time explaining the world you live in so that you can more easily connect to the characters and actually get invested in the quests they ask you to do would have greatly helped quell some of the frustration. Now, just to let you all know, this is a game I bought myself for the channel. I didn't receive any review code. And I did so because I was truly interested in this game and I was really hoping for a great experience. And I really wanted to love Baldo. And although the art style and charm delivered, it's like the design of the gameplay, on the other hand, was actively trying to make me dislike the game. I do want to say though, if you hear these flaws and they seem like something you can deal with over a 50-hour journey, then you might be able to play and like this game. For me though, it's 30 more hours I just don't want to endure at this point. Now, as a closing thought, I do want to say that I respect the heck out of a 2-person team trying to deliver on a 50+ hour Zelda-like game, without going the simpler pixel art route and design. However, I do feel that they did themselves a disservice by choosing this scope of a game. And had they reined it in to a 15 to 25 hour adventure, reduced the number of quests but made each quest memorable, and fleshed out a little bit more the world's backstory, I think they could have delivered on one heck of a game. And I'll say it again, I still do believe that somewhere in here there is a great game screaming to come to the surface. Now, overall, these are my thoughts on Baldo. I don't want this to come off as a rant, and I don't want this to come off as I'm ragging on the game. And as I said, if you enjoyed the game, enjoy it. I just want to make sure that for people that have not picked up the game yet, you know what type of game you're embarking on. So anyway, as I said at the beginning, don't forget that if you did like the content, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you aren't already, and hit that notification bell so you know when all my future content comes out. And as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.